There are a few territories with a past so well preserved and just so little known as the coastal plains of Peru. Deprived of rain by the lofty cordilleras of the Andes that tap the westbound trade wind, clouds on their eternal drift from the Atlantic side of South America. The Pacific coast of Peru is a desert, but one which preserves a boundless wealth of antiquities. Throughout its length, the 2,000-kilometer, 1,200-mile long coastline of Peru is a narrow belt of sand, open beaches, and rocky cliffs sheltered by the Andes. All along this arid coastline, there is ample evidence of intensive former habitation by a diversity of culturally advanced civilizations. Ruins of adobe walls, burial fields pitted by tomb robbers, colossal step pyramids, and other monumental structures can be found, eroded and deformed by the infrequent but torrential El Nino rains and drifting sand. When the invading Spaniards rode past the Tucume pyramids on the Inca road, they were amazed at the sight of such enormous monuments from a forgotten past. But modern tourists have rushed by on the new highway in their thousands, ignoring what they missed in their hurry. For the Tucume pyramids are successfully camouflaged both by erosion and even more by their very dimensions in the tropical sunlight. They show up in the distance like bright sandstone mountains with the blue Andes as shadows behind. Until emerging into the limelight in recent years, the colossal buildings at Tucume have towered unnoticed over the plains as if left there by the Creator. Oh, wow. Hey, much love and respect. Pura vida, mi gente. Thanks for tuning in once again. I was just reading just now this book right here we're going to get into today by Thor Heyerdahl. If you don't know who he is, he was actually one of the guys who went all the way from Peru to Polynesia on a raft, and then he also crossed the Atlantic and he did the Indian Ocean. So he was trying to prove that ancient people could navigate the oceans, and he proved it. But he also is an anthropologist. He did a lot of explorations in South America and Peru, and this is one of his books. All right, it's Pyramids of Tucume, The Quest for Peru's Forgotten City. All right, so we're going to continue reading.
The Lambayeque civilization, also known as Sicon, thrived on the northern coast of Peru from around 750 to 1375 CE. Positioned between the Middle Horizon and Late Intermediate period of the Central Andes, the Lambayeque people were renowned creators of art objects, intricate masks, and stunning goldwork. Their artistic contributions have significantly influenced the evolution of Andean art, leaving behind some of the most iconic imagery from ancient Americas. According to tradition, the Lambayeque dynasty was founded by Namap, who arrived from the south with a group of warriors on balsa boats or rafts. They established themselves in various valleys of the region, a legend that later influenced the Chimu civilization.
To the people in Tucume, this naked wilderness of eroded pyramids in their backyard is known as El Purgatorio, the Purgatory. For more than 4 centuries, they have regarded the ruins as shameful remains of their pagan ancestors, a place where past and present medicine men communed with devils. Only the director of the Brunnen Archaeological Museum in the nearest town of Lambayeque fully understood the importance of the ruins for science and for tourism. But his enthusiasm did not reach the authorities in Lima, nor the tourists who rushed by, until tomb robbers hit upon unbelievable treasures in a similar pyramid at nearby Sipan. The Tucume pyramids continued to slumber, neglected under carpets of sand. The conquistadors from Europe found the Lambayeque Valley still intensively cultivated through artificial irrigation. The original pyramid builders had watered vast areas of the surrounding desert plains for untold centuries, when the highland Incas preceded the Spaniards as conquerors of the coast. All right, again, just like the Iroquois and the Aztec, a lot of the Incas, they came in as conquerors before the Europeans had arrived. They were newcomers to the area, not ancient. Today, Tucume, with the adjacent Algarrobo forest of Batan Grande, seems like an oasis in the arid desert that is Peru's coastal plain, crisscrossed by pre-Inca irrigation channels. These impressive canals were built by skilled hydraulic engineers during Moshe times in the first millennium AD. And again, this is according to their datings we got to rely on. The largest, the Taimi Canal, more than 70 kilometers, 45 miles long, runs close alongside the Tucume Pyramid Complex. From Tucume, it was navigable for medium-sized rafts of balsa wood or reeds down to the sea in one direction and way inland in the other, until regulated by modern sluices. An ancient road runs the 20-kilometer, 12-mile down the sea, past the fisherman's town of Morope, and the legendary site of two large pyramids, Chotuna and Chornancap, barely inland from the shore, where oral tradition records that Namelap, the founder of the first Lambayeque dynasty, had landed. Now, as when the Spaniards arrived, both fresh and dried fish brought from the sea are an important part of the diet of the people of Tucume. The same roads that hastened the Spanish advance had also helped the Inca Tupac Yupanqui to conquer the Lambayeque Valley and the rest of the Inca Empire 3 generations earlier. With the already existing network of roads, these well-organized warriors from the high Andes divided the Pacific lowland into provinces and communities, as well controlled from Cusco and Tomebamba, as was the Roman Empire from Rome. Again, just like the Romans, these Incas, right? Just like the Iroquois, maybe even like the Aztecs. They did everything just like the Romans did the Empire of Rome. The Incas have, with good reason, been considered the Romans of medieval South America. Listen, the Romans, just like the Iroquois, they were great conquerors and statesmen who absorbed their culture from other earlier civilizations. All right? They weren't ancient there. The Incas are generally regarded as the peak of Peruvian civilization, but archaeological excavations along the entire coast are now disclosing details of the little known but impressive earlier civilizations, all different from each other and yet clearly related. The history of these forgotten cultures has never been written because they were partly destroyed and partly absorbed by each other and finally shallowed up by the Inca invaders. Again, Inca invaders, a few generations before the Spanish chroniclers came. If we are ever to understand the intricate network of interrelated and yet seemingly independent Peruvian cultures, we first have to appreciate the ability of the Aboriginal Peruvians, the indigenous that were there since ancient times, to communicate over long distances. The Inca emperors dominated a nation so vast that it had two capitals, Cusco in Peru and Tomebamba, now Cuenca. Remember Cusco, possibly Jerusalem, City of David, Sacsayhuaman. In modern Ecuador, both as high as up as in the Andes, as average peaks in the Swiss Alps, and further apart than Paris and Rome, Inca caravans and administrators, as well as armies, benefited from roads built by others before them who had also had need of long distance communication. So now, see what I'm saying? The Incas, they get the credit for these Inca roads, but a lot of them were already there when they got there and invaded. Modern archaeology has demonstrated that many of what had been called Inca roads are actually of pre-Inca origin. The possibility should therefore not be overlooked that some of the pre-Inca civilizations, like those of Tiwanaku, Chavin, or coastal valleys such as Lambayeque or Chicama, were pan-Peruvian, or at least temporarily linked together by religious ties or organized commerce. Indeed, mountain evidence from the whole of Peru suggests that the early communities in the coastal valleys were not as isolated from each other nor from those in the Andean highlands, as was hitherto presumed. At least a millennium before the Incas descended to conquer the Pacific coast, merchants in the Lambayeque Valley obtained great quantities of seashells from Ecuador and perhaps Panama, and lapis lazuli from the central coast of Chile. Thus, the cultural elite of well organized societies such as those of Sipan, Batan Grande, and Tucume were able to absorb cultural impulses from a coastline at least as long as that of the subsequent Inca Empire.
Instead of a centralized empire, Lambayeque rulers oversaw a network of interconnected cities linked by familial ties. Batan Grande, situated in the La Leche Valley, was a crucial Lambayeque site. The region had an irrigation system of canals and 17 large burial mounds, the largest being Waka Quarter, spanning 250 square meters. Within these pyramid mounds, tombs containing mummied bundles, sacrificial victims, and precious items made from copper alloys, silver, and gold were discovered. There were hundreds of gold cups or beakers with relief figures of rulers. Around 1100 CE, Batan Grande was abandoned, possibly due to an El Niño climate event, with floods followed by extended droughts. Although the structures show signs of intentional fire damage, the Lambayeque moved to Tucume, which became their new religious capital. Tucume expanded to cover 370 hectares, making it the largest ceremonial center in the ancient Andes. Ferro-Huaringa was a vital hub for Lambayeque metal production, housing smelting furnaces and workshops. Particularly noteworthy were copper-shaped ingots, naipes, which functioned as a form of currency during the Lambayeque culture's peak between 900 and 1100 CE. This is a rare instance in ancient Americas. Lambayeque rulers did not actively pursue regional conquests. Instead, they were eventually absorbed into the Chamu Empire around 1375 CE. Artists from Lambayeque were forcibly relocated to Chanchan, the Chamu capital. This intercultural exchange continued the lineage of Andean art, passing on symbols like rulers with crescent-shaped headdresses, distinctive pottery forms, and advanced metalworking techniques. The Lambayeque civilization's astonishing wealth echoes through their remarkable art and architectural achievements.
From history, we know that the Incas, who traveled on foot, controlled and influenced peoples throughout the deserts, highlands, and jungles from the borders of Colombia to Ecuador, Peru, Bolivia, and well into Chile and Argentina. Although an inland and landlocked people, they thus came to rule over coastal settlements in their vast empire. Not only were people in Tucume eating produce from the sea when the Spaniards arrived, but as recounted by the chroniclers, the Incas in the distant highlands had fish brought from the Pacific by relay runners. The chronicler Guaman Poma recorded that clams from the Tumbes on the north coast were brought live to the Inca in Cusco. It has for too long been assumed that all Peruvians in pre-Columbian times had neither the vessels nor daring to take them further than inshore fishing and the crudest of craft. This misconception stemmed from the dearth of information concerning daily life along the coast prior to the Inca period. Only in the last 30 years have archaeologists turned their attention to a great number of coastal sites where they have found that communities in the pre-Inca period based their economy to a great extent on fishing and maritime trade. From the moment the Spanish conquistadors ascended to the Inca cities in the mountains and were confronted with their gold and splendor, they were so impressed that they credited the Incas with all the achievements of Peruvian culture. All right, they gave them all the credit, they took all the credit. But again, they were conquerors, invaders. They had recently come before the Europeans arrived, just like the Iroquois conquered many tribes before the Europeans got here, just like the Aztecs were recent to that area. The conquered coastal peoples from whom the wealthy Incas had forcibly acquired most of their wealth. All right, they took their wealth from who? Listen, left only a slight impression on the newcomers from Europe and their chroniclers. The little information the chroniclers did record of their first meeting with Peruvians along the coast is therefore of great importance. Certainly, the people the Spaniards met on the coast were already strongly influenced by their involuntary contact with Inca customs and culture. But the invaders from the highlands had surely not taught them how to build improved watercraft nor turned them into better mariners. Indeed, whatever the arriving Spaniards observed the maritime activity on their first contact with Peru will bring us the closest we will ever get to a correct image of what life had been like for centuries along these coasts. Only by combining historic and archaeological evidence will we be able to interpret and understand what excavations reveal to us and to Kume. So some of the images from the book, here's a map, some of the archaeological sites here. Here you see a canal going into a river, and this river ends up in the ocean, so they had access to the ocean. Just want to read here. What we're going to look at is a photo of an archaeological complex in Tucume, looking east from Huaca del Pueblo. This immense site covering 220 hectares or 544 acres had been virtually forgotten and was almost untouched by archaeologists until Thor Heyerdahl organized a massive program of excavations. And now I'm going to go to the 2-page view so you guys can see. This is the image right here. 2 pages. It's a whole, it looks like a mountain, right? But it's a whole archaeological complex. It's huge. It's huge what they have here in Tucume, in Peru. This has been forgotten. Yeah, it looks like a mountain, but it's a pyramid archaeological man-made complex. Here we have a zoomed in part, some of the pictures of this archaeological man-made complex. I know it looks just like a mountain, but it's eroded. Who knows how old this is. This literally looks like a mud flood or melted building, right? Here's another one. And here's I believe Thor. And another image here. All this was pyramids, all man-made. This is not mountain, this is not geology, this is archaeological. And another image here. See the skyline, these are huge, right?
The Lambayeque civilization's opulence is vividly showcased through their remarkable art and architecture. Their palaces, sprawling over vast territories, were impressive displays of wealth. Gold took center stage in their artistic creations, adorning everything from body ornaments to masks. The elite members of society flaunted their riches unabashedly, wearing tunics embellished with panels of gold. An extant tunic boasts an astonishing 2,000 square gold editions, accompanied by oversized earspools in gold and turquoise, splendid feather headdresses, and even golden gloves. The term conspicuous consumption could easily be coined to describe the Lambayeque elite's lifestyle. Lambayeque pottery is characterized by their sculpted and polished blackware, achieved through the use of molds for mass production. Relief decoration on pottery could be intricate, featuring human faces near the spout and animal figures. Inspired by the Moche tradition, their favored vessel was the double-spouted variety, often adorned with a finely carved bridge and a distinctive flared foot. Notably, silver examples of these vessels have also been uncovered. Metalwork was an area of particular expertise for the Lambayeque people, especially in gold. The intricate process involved engraving, molding, cutting, soldering, and inlaying of the alloy material.
Tucume, a temple city called Purgatory. The first European to visit Tucume and record his impressions was the Spanish chronicler Pedro Cieza de León. After landing with some of the conquistadors on the coast further north, he rode through the coastal deserts into the fertile Lambayeque Valley and left for posterity brief descriptions of the settlements he found along the Inca Road. Tucume, he says, sublime and beautiful, green with luxuriant growth and plantations, and furthermore with great edifices which, although destroyed and in ruins, testified to his greatness in the past. His words also conveyed the impression that the site had on our group of modern travelers. 4.5 centuries later, when we took a short walk off the busy Pan American highway to see what is the greatest complex of prehistoric pyramids in South America. There are 26 pyramids here, and all are untouched, all right? 26 pyramids in one spot, guys, explained our companion, and they haven't been excavated or explored. He was Walter Alva, the Peruvian archaeologist who first told us about the site. It had lain in oblivion since seen by the conquistadors, untouched except for the gnawing teeth of time. I could hardly believe my own eyes. The Spanish conquistadors were used to completely unexpected sites when they arrived to explore what at that time was a new world for Europeans. We, who looked at the same site in 1987, were neither accustomed nor prepared for something unfamiliar in advance from tourist guides or textbooks, except for our locally born guide. My companions were visibly as dumbfounded and amazed as I. I literally felt like a visitor to another planet. There was nothing like this strange and colossal ruins on our own familiar Earth. You try to get the government interested, said Walter Alva. He had tried in vain. Here's another image. Just so you guys can get a perspective. Look how big this is. Again, this is a man-made structure called Waka. Remember Waka's sacred places, Waka. Check out my Wakanda in America video, Waka del Pueblo, a huge eroded pyramid in the middle of the modern village of Tucume. All right, here it goes. The early historic documents about Lambayeque in general and about Tucume in particular were all written by Spaniards. There is no known early native chronicler for the region. Second, the available sources fall into two major categories: oral history of pre-Hispanic events and rulers, and documents generated by Spanish colonial officials trying to administer the region. Each category has its strengths and weaknesses. The principal source of oral history is the Naimlap legend, recorded independently by Cabello in 1586 and Rubiños y Andrade in 1781, written when some people born before the Spanish conquest were still alive. The Cabello version is closer in time to the supposed events described and more complete than the Rubiños y Andrade rendering. However, the two accounts are very similar, providing independent confirmation of the details of the Naimlap story. In Chapter 1, Thor has detailed Cabello's version, and I will summarize it here. The great lord Naimlap arrived in Lambayeque on balsa rafts with his subjects and retainers and built a palace at Chot. On his death, he was succeeded by 11 consecutive rulers in his line, beginning with his oldest son, Siun. Siun's 12 sons, all right, 12, listen, 12 sons spread throughout the valley to found their own settlements. Among them, Kala went to Tucume. Nameless old retainer, Lepchu Luli, also founded a settlement at Yayanka. Because Cabello first lists the rulers of the whole valley, presumably Sium's sons' settlements remained subordinate to the named head of the dynasty. The last of Namelap's line was Fempelek, Pelek, who committed a great sin that brought on 30 days of rain and caused his subjects to throw him in the ocean. After Fempelek's death, an interregnum of unspecified lands followed before the Chimu Empire conquered the area and placed a native Chimu lord named Hong Masa over the valley. Masa. Masa Musa? Masa? Hong Masa was succeeded by his son Pales Masa and grandson Oxa, during whose reign the Inca passed through Cajamarca in the neighboring highlands. After Oxa came 6 more rulers of the same family. The Spanish conquest occurred during the 6th lord's reign. Cabello says that after the word of the Inca in Cajamarca reached Lambayeques in Oxa's reign, the lords of the valley lived in constant fear of being deposed by the Highlanders. However, he does not specify when the Inca conquest of Lambayeque actually took place. In addition to the Namelap story, Cabello provides one other piece of information concerning Tucume. He writes that when the Spanish conquistadors first passed through the region in 1532, they were received by the lord of Yayanca, who had just concluded certain wars with the Tucumes, a people who had given themselves over to devotion of the Chimus, the capital enemies of the lord of Yayanca. That 2 neighboring polities could have been warring while under overall Inca jurisdiction has been taken by some to indicate the loose nature of Inca control over the region. The Namelap legend offers another perspective on the conflict between Tucume and Yayanca. All of the known polities in the Lambayeque Valley complex were said to have been settled by Sium's sons, Namelap's grandsons, except Yayanca, which was settled by Lapchi Luli, a member of Namelap's court who was a master of making feather garments. All right, a master of making feather garments. If Lambayeque was a loose federation based on kinship, fictive or real, this detail could explain why Yayanka was alienated from Tucume and perhaps the rest of the Lambayeque Valley complex. Beyond Cabello's brief notice of the war with Yayanka, there are only glimpses of pre-Hispanic Tucume in other administrative documents dealing with the region. Ramirez has found and collated evidence for 15 different kinds of specialists in the Tucume polity, recorded within 45 years of the conquest. Carpenters, cooks, chicha, corn beer, right? Remember the beer they made out of corn, call it chicha. Makers, spindle makers, merchants, who's the merchants, potters, fishermen, cloak painters, silversmiths, salt makers, shoemakers, chair makers, weavers, dyers, and deer hunters. The bulk of the population, however, were farmers. Tucume was thus a typical coastal polity, composed of groups of specialists, some full-time and exclusive, such as fishermen, some part-time, some living under their own specialist lords, though subject through him to the paramount lord of Tucume. Fishermen are again as examples, some attached to the paramount or subordinate lords, such as cooks, though they're different specialists, and by controlling a variety of resource zones, the lords of coastal polities such as Tucume had access to almost any coastal product they might need. For instance, the abundance of marine shells and the presence of fish bones at Tucume are archaeological evidence for supply from the shoreline. The ethno-historic record names the lords of various early colonial fishing groups subordinate to Tucume, such as Don Diego, Mochumi. Whether the coastal lords also controlled lands in the highlands before the Inca conquest is not clear, but such was the case under the Inca. For instance, in 1540, Tucume still had lands in Guambos in the highlands of modern Cajamarca, which at that time were worked by Indians from Yayanka. In 1561 to 82, Tucume Mitmac, look at that, Mitmac, groups of Indians, Mitmac, Micmac, that sounds like Micmac, groups of Indians which the Inca state resettled in areas distant from their home, where in Cajamarca, Indians from Tucume were sent to Simbal in the upper Moche Valley to build walls around coca fields, which the Inca state had taken over from the local lords. After the walls were built, the Tucume men returned home. Netherly suggests that sending these people so far to carry out a simple task which local folk could easily have done may have been an exemplary punishment for a regional polity which was loyal to the Chimo and hostile to the Inca. Although the lords and subjects of Tucume are often mentioned in the administrative documents of the 16th century, we have only one eyewitness account of the site of Tucume from the early colonial period. Pedro Cieza de León was a Spaniard who traveled through the former Inca Empire some 15 years after the conquest. Although often engaged in military campaigns as a foot soldier, Cieza was a careful observer who kept notes and later wrote long accounts of what he had seen and heard. In 1547, he wrote from Yayanca through the valley of Tucume, the lands watered by the Taimi Canal, and described how, although ruined, the remains of Tucume still bore witness to its former grandeur. If Tucume was abandoned so quickly, where did the people go? Local tradition and the presence of an early church point to Tucume Viejo, just north of the archaeological site, though the population of this hamlet could never have rivaled that of Tucume. At its height under the Inca, rapid depopulation of the coast may account for some of the difference, but there must be other explanations as well.
Some of the most renowned art pieces from the Andes hail from Lambayeque, such as the gold ceremonial knives, Tucume, featuring handles representing Sacon lords. Inlaid with turquoise, these handles portray impressive headdresses, multiple earrings, small wings at the shoulders, a beak-like nose, and the characteristic Lambayeque tear-shaped eyes. The form may symbolize Namelap, the legendary first ruler who was said to have grown wings and flown into the sunset. Tucume knives served ceremonial purposes, including human sacrifices that involved decapitation, while functional versions had sharp bronze blades. A standout piece of Lambayeque art is the splendid gold mask and headdress ensemble from Tomb 1 of the Waka Loro burial mound in Batang Grand. The red painted mask features ear spools and a three-dimensional gold bat's head at the forehead. The towering headdress is adorned with gold feathers and 15 suspended gold discs. This mask belonged to a seated male, aged between 40 and 50, laid to rest in a 9-square-meter tomb beneath an 11-meter shaft. The ruler embarked on the afterlife accompanied by an array of treasures, costumes, ceramics, and functional items. Lambayeque litters found in tombs are noteworthy. These wooden structures, adorned with gold accents, often contain figurines of rulers and were originally adorned with feathers. Lambayeque textiles, however, display a slightly unconventional style compared to other Andean weavers. Their borders are roughly cut, and back threads are left loose, possibly indicating a focus on quantity over meticulousness. Designs frequently include animals, fish, and the iconic standing ruler figure seen in other art forms. Finally, shells, particularly spondyles from Ecuador, served as popular materials for jewelry and inlay, a tradition that the Chamu continued after their conquest of the Lambayeque Valley.
During the early years of the colony, Spanish conquistadors were granted encomiendas. Remember, that was their way of saying plantation systems, slavery, having indentured servants or slaves, the right to enjoy the tributes of Indians within a certain boundary or make them slaves, with the duty of protecting them and seeing to their religious welfare and then making them Christians. An encomienda was not a grant of land. No, literally, it was slavery. Encomiendas were often roughly equivalent to the pre-Hispanic polities, but sometimes a polity was divided among two or more encomenderos, or the enslavers or masters. Such was the case at Tucume in 1536. So they enslaved the Kume Indians. Francisco Pizarro gave the Indians of Tucume to Juan Roldan and Juan de Osorno. They were enslaved to these two people. The subsequent, and again, not Africans, the subsequent history of Tucume's encomenderos and of the various subdivisions of the original Tucume territory is quite complex, but does not concern us here. Oh, let's not talk about the slavery. In the 1570s, Viceroy Francisco de Toledo carried out a policy of resettlement of the native communities into a smaller number of more easily administered reducciones. All right, sounds like the first projects. Oh, let's resettle them. A process which on the north coast had been started a decade earlier by Cuenca. By the end of the 1570s, the pattern of settlement in Peru was no longer a reliable indicator of pre-Hispanic life. Among the many things lost in the reducciones was the knowledge, built up over millennia, of where to position settlements to best avoid natural disasters. One such disaster is El Niño. Major El Niño events occurred only once or twice a century. In 1578, the first serious El Niño of the colonial period ravaged the north coast of Peru with flood, insects, diseases, and other plagues, while ancient Tucume lay on the slopes of La Raya mountain above the floodwaters. Many of the new settlements in Lambayeque were situated on the floodplain and were washed away. In an inquest carried out 2 years later, witnesses for the native lord of Tucume spoke of the terrible destruction. In the words of one, the river left its bed and passed through the middle of this village and carried away the houses of the Indians and that of the cacique, lord, and the hospital, and the community houses, and the church. Some people left the region altogether, heading north or south. The remaining inhabitants of Tucume were forced to seek refuge on the hills and the high huacas or pyramids. They're not hills, they're not mountains, they're pyramids. The huacas, the sacred places they had to climb on, they were saved there. In other words, ancient Tucume. They did not, however, move back permanently, and even the modern village of Tucume, different again from Tucume Viejo, was seriously damaged by the 1982-83 El Nino. Since then, a small population has moved on to the northeast side of the site, but most are still exposed to the devastation of the next flood. The pyramids of Tucume, the monumental sector. The north and northwest quadrants of Tucume contain the greatest concentration of pyramids at the site, so we refer to it as the monumental sector. It is the buildings in this sector which make Tucume the largest pyramid center in Peru. Our excavations here have concentrated on three structures: Huaca Larga, a 700-meter, 2,300-foot long raised platform pyramid; the Temple of the Sacred Stone, a small U-shaped structure just east of Huaca Larga; and Huaca 1, the tallest of Tucume's man-made pyramids. We also excavated test pits in several other parts of the monumental sector, such as the plaza to the east of Huaca Las Estacas. Here's an image. All right, guys, what they're talking about, this was huge. All right, you see the erosion. You know what happened here? You guys see that? A whole. So remember, 26 pyramids in this one region. This is one of the main parts where it has so many pyramids right next to each other. And again, this is not what they look like before, but this is what they look like now. So the book goes on to talk about, the excavations they carried out here. And you guys can go ahead and take a look at this, the positive you like. So we're going to talk about this temple of the mythical bird or bird temple on platform 2. Right here it says one of the tricolor phase burial found on Huaca Larga platform 1, Chimo period. As these burials form part of the construction process and were not intrusive, they may have been sacrifices. All right, that's what they're saying. Here's another image. Pretty good image. Again, huge, right? These were man-made structures which are now in ruin. These are the people excavating, the anthropologists, archaeologists, right? And the guy writing this book and funding everything. So the Temple of the Mythical Bird has numerous interconnected rooms to the east and west of the central chamber, with the western area smaller than the eastern area. The rooms were reached via ramps on the southeast of platform 2. The floors of the temple and its connected rooms were clean of midden, but food preparations probably took place in the kitchen area located just below platform 2 on the south. Here it says an adobe structure with a checkboard pattern of inset and salient squares east of the temple of the mythical bird from the tricolor phase, Chimo period. So this is at the start of the excavation. As you guys see, this is what was on top. And when they start digging, this is what they're finding. All right. And in these walls, a lot of them have inscriptions, designs, hieroglyphics, all that. So here, I just wanted to show you this image. You guys see that? What appears to be like a bird, right, going down. Do you guys see that, right? Does that look familiar to you guys? It says here above, remains of the mural of diving birds on the wall of the temple of the mythical bird, tricolor phase, Chimu period. A section of this mural had been uncovered by looters in 1953 and photographed by visiting archaeologists. So below the wall paintings in the temple of the mythical bird. All right. So mythical bird. I'm going to show you guys what I was reminded about when I saw these drawings. All right. You guys ever seen the bird in the window in the churches? Look at this. Like this one going down. Just like it. See, going down. Backwards. Look at this one right here. All right. I'm going to go back to the book. You guys see that? Bird going down. A bird going down. So stained glass beauty. A bird going down. Just like in Tucume, Peru, ancient. The bird going down. Who copied who? You see that? Talk about pagan. Here you got Thor Heyerdahl inspecting the enclosure on the west side of Huaca Larga. You see, these are again man-made monuments, not mountains, not cliffs. Here we got, it says adobe, simple sun-dried mud bricks form the basic building block for Tucume's monumental pyramids. Here they are exposed in a Huaca wall in the monumental sector, you see? It's not a mountain. Look at the adobe right under, it's man-made. It just looks like that on top. Here's some more images. They started digging. This is what they started finding, burials, pottery, artifacts, burials of weaving women or aklas found in Huaca Larga platform 2, room 3, dating to the Inca period. These women may well have been sacrificed to accompany the high status burial found in room 1 of the same building. May have, they don't know. They might be just making that up. And here's a pottery right here, a vase. Here we got some more images. I just want to show you guys this. All right, this is what they find in here in Tucume pyramids, right? When they're doing their excavation, it says above left, the head of the mummy still wearing a red padded hat with a red and yellow tassel. All right, a tassel such as it is described by Inca chroniclers. Around the head was a silver diadem, and still in place were 2 silver ear spools. Okay, ear spools. Look at this. So gold, a tassel around the head. Come on now. This is advanced people with a culture. Who got time? These ain't savage people who got time to make, jewelry out of gold and crowns and headgears and all that, right? And just, the tassel and everything. And here we got the silver diadem with cut out circles from the head of the mummy. It says here a copper Tucume knife, silver ear spools, silver ear picks, and copper and silver tweezers found with the mummy bundle. All right, you see all these artifacts, all the stuff these people had with them. Over here on the left, very small guys, but it says 2 pairs of early colonial glass earrings from the final fill-in platform 2 of Waka Larga. You hear that? Glass earrings. Earrings out of glass. Who has time to make earrings? Come on, these are advanced people. We're talking about the true old world. This right here says hypothetical reconstruction of the temple of the sacred stone. Okay, I'm gonna show you an above image of this in ruins. So this is what they're saying it might have looked like, right? This is what it looks like in ruins. All right, black and white picture. Today, so a lot of it is buried. A lot of it you got to dig in to get. It's buried. This is at the base of some of the bigger pyramids. Here on the left it says we have a head of an Inca silver figurine wrapped in a cloak fastened with a copper tupu pin found in a pit in the courtyard in front of the temple of the sacred stone. All right, this is what they're finding here. Let me just show you guys. And then these two right here, they're gonna give a description. It says below 2 Spotilus figurines, 1 male and 1 female, were discovered in an offering pit located outside and to the east of the entrance of the temple of the sacred stone. Front and side views, they are shown here without the textiles that originally closed them. Bottom left, Inca male figurine carved from Spedilius shell and wearing woven clothes tied with a belt and a headdress. This figurine was found in the same pit as a female figurine. Bottom right, Inca female figurine carved Spondilius shell, also dressed in woven clothes. All right, again, this is what they're finding in Tucume. All right, here's some more. You guys see that? Pretty cool. Inca silver figurine with a splendid feathered headdress, silver tupu pin, and polychrome woven cloth. One of the most spectacular finds from Tucume. It came from one of the offering pits just west of the entrance of the Temple of the Sacred Stone. Front and back views. All right, again, front and back views. Look at that. All right, here's another view. A general view of the south and east sides of Waka 1. That's Waka 1, a pyramid, man-made. They're gonna start showing you parts of inside of it. Overview again here from the top. And some of the more other structures, all these look like mountains today with, eroded mountains. This is the west side of the top of Waka 1 with a 6-axis ramp dating to phase H2, Lambayeque, Tucume period. See the walls, okay, under the rubble. As you guys can see here, look at this wall, still painted, still looks white or whatever color it was. You see what's on top of it, like this mud. Right here it says seabird friezes found on top of Waka 1, phase H3. These are in the Chimu style and comparable ones were found at the Chimu capital, Chanchan. You guys see what they have here buried in the wall of decorations, hieroglyphics on the walls here. This is what they were leaving unexcavated for so many years. This is what they're calling a Y-shaped algarrobo post. In the background, more algarrobo logs. All right, this is what they're finding there. And some more things. I just want you to go ahead and take a look at this. I'm gonna zoom in. All right, I'm gonna zoom in just so you guys can see what they're finding in the Tucume pyramids in ancient Peru. This is what they found inside, buried. You see that phenotype? All right. It says late Lambayeque style pottery vessels from a burial on top of Waka 1, probably dating to the Chimu period. So it says here the Maritime connection. We're still in the same book. And it says Waka las Balsas. This pyramid is called las Balsas, or the ships or the canoes. Right? Why? Because they found in the walls inscriptions showing people on canoes, you know. So this is right here. Let's just go to this image. It says Waka las Balsas in this face. The relief was a row of crouching birdmen with half-moon headdresses. Birdmen, right, like dove, with half-moon headdresses, like dove, holding round objects in their hands. Above them, the wall was cut out in a series of wave motifs. Waves, all right, they're on the ocean. Here's another image. So you guys see what they're excavating here. There's the signs on the walls. Literally, hieroglyphics, Adobe hieroglyphics. Adobe buildings with hieroglyphics. This is what's buried. Alfredo Narves examining the relief exposed by looters. Pit and Huaca Las Balsas. The pit had cut the balsas frieze to the right, north of the main panel, and the center of the frieze of the right is visible. Here's another image of that, and you guys can see what looks like a boat right here, and right next to it as well. And they're looking at it. This is what's excavated again. Here's a close-up image. And we're gonna go ahead and read the description. You guys can see. This close-up of the right-hand raft of the balsa's frieze, and then opposite a detail of the anthropomorphic wave motif from the balsa's frieze. Again, that's what this is, the raft. Here in this image, well, first they found a lot of shells so they know there was, trade going on. They had access to the ocean and everything. Here you can see what it describes here, a wooden object, probably a steering board for a small raft, found in the rectangular compound, Sector 5. All right, they were in the rivers, they were in the ocean, navigating. So the north side of the West Mount, Sector 5, showing the empty tomb chamber and other features dating to phase WM1. They probably robbed them, the looters took everything. Imagine. The detail of the skeleton of a 12 to 15-year-old woman buried next to the clay architectural model. Note the small circular wooden beads, many of which are still aligned in their original position, thus preserving the form of the necklace. The jaw was broken when the body was forced into the narrow pit between pre-existing walls. All right. There's here death in ancient Tucume, the South Cemetery in Huaca, Facho. So even on the ones we already saw, there was many burials. The site was known to have many burials. Here we're just gonna look at some image. Here, as you guys can see, Inca period burials in the South Cemetery. The burial of the upper right includes a North Coast Inca-style fish pot. Some pottery here, as you guys can see. A Lambayeque period vessel found with a redware Waco ray pot and a burial in the South Cemetery. The stuff they're getting buried with. Look at how sophisticated this is and the designs. Advanced people. This is another one right here. Look at that with the two faces. This is a very ancient symbol all over the so-called old world. Look, they're finding this right here in Tucume, Peru. They're also finding this right here. You guys see this? Pretty cool. Look at the hair is braided, right? The hair is braided. That's what it looks like to me. It says, right, two North Coast Inca-style head pots found in the South Cemetery. All right, look at that. Looks almost like, anywhere found anywhere in the old world, so-called old world on the other side, right? Some more pottery vessels here. Look at the color of these. Wow. And it has the signs on them. Pottery accompanying an Inca period burial in the South Cemetery, including a blackware vessel in the form of Galapagos turtle. All right, lower left. The two blackware vessels on the right are in the form of monkeys, while the one on the upper left represents four fruits, probably locumas. The redware vessel is a typical carinated rim cooking olla. Wow, look at that. Another tomb here, chamber in the same South Cemetery. You know, desecrating tombs, looting, all that's going on. And some more artifacts. Look how cool this one looks. Very interesting designs. A lot of art going into and uniqueness. Above a Chimu style vessel in the form of a bat. Okay, bat. A Chimu style vessel from the Tomb 1 chamber burial. This one right here. And here again, they're going to show you in the drawing what they're seeing here. They're in rafts, as you guys can see in this drawing right here. See the water. They even got sticks sticking out the stair. Here's another drawing right here. As you guys can see, he's holding a stick and he's in the ocean. A Moshe line drawing of reed boats propelled by human legs running across the tops of the waves. All right. And then we got this artifact right here. Look at this. Even showing that they're fishing. He's got a steer right here to help him. Looking like a canoe. All right, look at that. That's real cool. Maritime motifs dominate the art of coastal Peru. This exceptionally fine silver specimen in the Gold Museum of Lima is 19 centimeters, 7.5 inches long, and shows fishermen on a reed balsa. Rafts are also reproduced in molded and painted pottery, tapestry, occasionally wood carving, and in relief on abode walls and silver vessels. Okay, awesome. Look at that. Here's another one. All right, can you see that? They're just writing. Is this a pipe? This is cool. Balsa raft of reed bundles are far more common than log balsas in the art of pre-Inca periods on the coast. This blackware effigy jar from the north coast has a fixed support for a removable mast locally known as a zapato or shoe, carved from a solid block of wood. The zapato is still used by fishermen in the same area on their small sailing rafts of balsa wood. This is collected from the Casinelli Museum, Trujillo, Peru. All right, you see that? They were navigators. Says here a detail of the left-hand raft of the balsas frieze, showing the cabin probably made from woven bamboo. You see the bird. And right here says a miniature double-bladed oar from an excavation in the South Plaza next to Waka 1. All right. Just like the ancient Egyptians navigated the so-called Nile. Same type of boat, same way, same stories, all that. Silver miniatures from the temple of the sacred stone, the paddle. Look at that. Paddle. So he goes into how, there's a connection with the Polynesians and they're navigating, they're always going to see it in reverse. We showed that they came out of here, going over there. When we talk about ancient navigators of the world, check out my videos on that. So again, that was the book Pyramids of Tucume, The Quest for Peru's Forgotten City. I mean, you guys should read the whole book if you want to know what, the whole expedition, the whole exploration, the whole archaeology, what he wrote, right, his version. But he did a pretty good job, I think. Again, this is him. This is the guy who went from Peru to Polynesia on a raft. He crossed the Pacific door. Doll, he's very famous for that. All right, and this is this man-made structure right here. We got barely a glimpse of lifeless prehistoric city of pyramids glowing like red hills in the last rays of the sun. Before the unreal vision was swallowed up in the tropical night, I knew what I had seen would change my life. How could I free myself from this sight? Unknown people like ourselves had lived here. What would these walls enclose and these pyramids contain? Thor Heyerdahl.